Up next, we've got a South by Southwest speaker alum, Synthesia co-founder and CEO Victor Riparbelli, who will be in conversation about the possibilities of AI in the workplace. Joining him is Every journalist Eleanor Warnock. Please give a warm welcome to Victor and Eleanor.
Is your next colleague going to be an avatar? Here to discuss are Victor Riparbelli, co-founder and CEO of Synthesia, and Eleanor Warnock, advisor at Beck Ventures. They are going to chat about a future in which video is interactive, and avatars like me move beyond simple narration to become sophisticated personal tutors, capable of real-time role-playing and mentorship. Victor and Eleanor, welcome to South by Southwest London.
Well, Victor, I don't think I've ever been welcomed on a stage before by an avatar, so that was an awesome flex. I did not know that was coming. Good job. I'd love to start our conversation off today by just kind of going on the journey of Synthesia and talking about how the product has evolved from the beginning. What kind of tech do we have today, do we have now, that you didn't have at the beginning of your Synthesia journey, and how has that changed the product?
So when we founded the company in 2017, we had like two big ideas. The first one was that AI is going to be able to not just analyze patterns in data, which is most of what people used AI or machine learning back then for in 2017. They actually be able to generate data and therefore also generate content. And once that started happening, what would happen is the marginal cost of creating content is going to drop to almost zero, not just in the dollars that it costs, but also very much in the time it would cost and the skill required to create something. And I think that idea we're kind of still early on, but that's clearly happening. You know, we've built a really big business around helping people make video with AI, essentially taking the production process and making that into an entirely digital workflow, right? And you know, we're doing it for businesses and corporate content. There are other companies doing it for entertainment and storytelling. And anyone who goes anywhere on the internet right now is going to see a lot of AI video of very high quality. So this is already sort of happening, right? The second big idea was that what has always happened throughout the history of media and technology is that when we invent new technologies, we also invent new media formats native to those technologies. It's very difficult to predict what they are, but it always happens, right? The idea for TikTok video exists because we have phones with front-facing cameras, and somehow people figured out that like recording yourself putting on your makeup while talking about something completely different, that's a new media format, right? When we invented, you know, the internet, our website looked like a newspaper on a screen because that was kind of what we could imagine. And then internet and websites turned into much more than just a newspaper on a screen. And so the same thing's going to happen for video. The big question is like, what is it going to look like, right? But what we are pretty sure it's not going to look like is broadcast video, which means you make one video and everybody watches exactly the same version of it. It's going to be more like a website that's personalized just for you. It's interactive. You can do a lot of things you couldn't do with a normal video. And so what we're right now launching with our customers is essentially our take on what AI native video will look and feel like. And it's all about video you can interact with and video you can talk to. So a lot of our use case today is around training and education. And if you think about like what most training education, how it works today is that you create a video for someone to watch. Let's say it's your sales team, for example. They'll watch the content, and that's a lot better than asking them to read 15 pages of in a document to understand something. But it still sort of ends at like, you can see if you've consumed the content, but we don't know if you've actually understood the content, right? Either because you just don't understand it, or maybe because you were scrolling TikTok the entire time. There's no way of like actually guaranteeing that. And for the learner, you can't really practice what you've learned, right? So if you take the sales example, what we've built now is essentially a role play functionality. So you can consume content and then go into a role play with an agent and an avatar that pretends to be a customer. And what we can then do is you can simulate what it would be like to be in a real call with a real customer, or having a difficult conversation, or a ton of other use cases. And that's extremely powerful because the agents are so good at actually pretending to be a customer, right? Yeah. That on average, the session length is 20 minutes that people are talking to these avatars. And basically you have to, in a sales context, answer product questions, set up next steps, build empathy, and do all the things you would do in a normal sales call. And we can then score you across a bunch of different dimensions and give you a learner score, kind of like if you're playing a game, and people can then improve. And so what we're seeing is people are using this kind of simulation wheel to get much better at selling a new product, for example, by practicing with an agent before you go and talk to a real customer. That's just one use case. In the future, we basically see these like real-time avatars as being a way for you to kind of set up a meeting that can run itself. If you want to interview a candidate, for example, if you want to do role plays for your training team, if you want to do a pulse survey with all of your employees and ask them how they feel about things, you can set this up with an avatar. And I think one of the key things that's very interesting about this new modality is what we've kind of realized in our testing is that for us humans, talking is so much faster than typing.
Totally, yeah.
So if you go in and you interview someone with an avatar, for example, right? Like the amount of information you can collect in 5 minutes is way more than the 5 minutes you would get if you ask people to fill out a form, for example. So you get much richer information, and then we can use LLMs to also summarize and find the patterns in that data. So I think it's going to be very exciting. We're going to move into this new era where we're going to have these new types of meetings almost, which is going to be like avatar to human meetings. That's just going to mean that humans can like relieve themselves of the busy work, having the same kind of repetitive meetings that just essentially is you asking the 10 of the same questions, and move to doing things that's more valuable.
In all of that testing that you've done with these new products, what have been some findings that have surprised you about the way maybe people are reacting to them or using them or even getting benefits from them?
So I think a lot of people's initial reaction is like, this is kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting and talking to this avatar.
Yeah.
But then what we see in the data is like once people kind of get over that hump, the learners really, really love it because it gives them a safe space to practice, right? You're not in front of a real customer where you might burn a lead if you're not like well prepared enough. And so what we're seeing on average is that 70% of people do multiple sessions to train themselves, and they improve their score by quite a lot. And I think that was always like a big question we wanted to answer. Like one thing is that in theory, it's great and sounds like really good, but it's really important that people actually like to interact with it and find it valuable and useful. And I think we've really proven that. The other things that's interesting is the fidelity of the avatar, like how does it look and feel, is super important for how the experience actually feels.
Yeah.
Adding in imperfections, like an avatar, for example, sometimes like taking a sip of a cup of coffee or saying, like all those things makes it feel more real and natural, as opposed to like like a completely kind of like like a perfect video, right?
Yeah, totally. And in between that employee interaction and your product, there's obviously the company, right? They're purchasing this and then they want to have their employees using it. What kind of learnings have you used from that, from working with companies to help them deploy AI in their businesses, about maybe how businesses more broadly can use AI better and like help employees see how it could benefit them?
Yeah, it feels like we've gone through this. I mean, the tech world is just such a frenzy right now. It's just like absolutely, everything's moving so fast, and I think everyone's like very exhausted of the pace of progress. And it feels to me like 12 months ago, everyone was in this mode of like, okay, AI is coming. We just need to like buy as many tools as we possibly can to figure out like what works for us.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those decisions was also partly driven by fear. All the way up and down the chain. The board is worried that the company is going to get torpedoed by a cool new AI startup that does everything with agents. The managers is afraid to not be seen as like AI forward enough in their thinking. The employees are afraid of not actually using AI tools enough. And so people bought a lot of things. And I think that's probably like the right approach for a lot of companies. But now people are starting to think about, okay, great, we have a lot of these tools. What is actually valuable and what's like driving real value? So what I'm seeing a lot with the customers that we work with is that it's gone from like how many tokens are you using, or like how much are you using the product, to like, can you explain like a business case for why you're doing what you're doing, right? And I think there's so many areas where AI helps us be more productive. There's also a lot of use cases, I think, which actually kind of does the opposite. So for example, I sent out a note to my team like 3 or 4 weeks ago saying that I'm really tired of reading very long documents, which really should have been 4 bullet points. Because everyone has LLMs now, right? People are like, oh, let me make a document that's like really intricate, really detailed.
Or let me make an HTML artifact. That's the other thing, to explain to you what we should be doing.
Exactly, and then you need to download an artifact and upload it. And of course, a lot of this stuff is cool, right? But like the amount of words we're all like being asked to consume now by our colleagues is crazy high because it's so easy to create it, right? And so what I said to my team is that because you don't want to spend 10 minutes editing your LLM written document, like there's now like 25 other people who's going to spend 5 minutes more on reading your document, right? Which means actually net negative productivity because we're all reading a lot more fluff than we used to. I think it's just like one example, but there's a lot of examples of this where it's like people go, oh, this is like really cool and smart. I can make a document in like 5 minutes, which looks really intricate. But is that actually like the right thing to do? In many cases, you're probably better off just like giving the 4 bullets, right? Especially if the person on the other end takes your document and then asks an LLM to summarize it, then we're like back to square one anyway.
Yeah.
So I think there's just a lot more like scrutiny now on like what's actually useful and where does it make sense to use these things and where doesn't.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like we're in this era where like a new kind of etiquette or like around AI use is emerging, but we don't really have a consensus about how it should be used yet, you know? I don't know if you're seeing that internally in Synthesia.
No, I think we are, right? It's because all these tools are so easy to use, they're so accessible. People use them a lot, they use them in very different ways, which I think is baseline is great, right? But I think every company now is like trying to figure out like, okay, how do we actually make this like useful? So of course we have like Slack channels, we try and highlight stories of like great AI use, people that share their prompts, they share like their Claude artifacts and their kind of workflows.
Yep.
But I think it is just like forcing yourself to think a bit more and like, if I think about this from first principles, is this actually valuable? Or is this like for sure super cool, but maybe not really like a net positive to
Totally.
work.
What risks are you worried about right now for your business or for just AI in general?
I mean, there's many different like zoom levels on that, right? I think as a business, I think obviously the world is changing so fast that everybody is like changing the way that they work, and that's the right thing to do. But it's also a bit to the point before, right? You want to make sure you're doing the right things. You also want to make sure you're not always like chasing the next shiny object.
Yep.
And just setting up new tools and like doing new types of working all the time, but actually focusing on like moving your business forward, right? There's a lot of implications of people using it. Like in coding, for example, we now have these code bases where most of the lines of code haven't been read by anyone.
Yep.
And like that's great. When you ship the first 10 features, it's like, wow, this is cool. We can move so much faster.
Yeah.
But if all of a sudden you ship 200 features that hasn't really been reviewed, you're opening yourself up for security vulnerabilities, a lot of like code bloat, and all this sort of stuff, which may be like very difficult to kind of like catch up to eventually. So I think being thoughtful about moving really fast and changing the ways of working, but also just not like installing OpenClaw and just like this thing's just going to run my business.
Yeah.
I think is very important, right? So I always try with these like hype cycles to take a measured stance and not like go too overboard, but obviously also not be too far back. I guess if you zoom out, like the big worry for everyone, I think is like job losses, job displacement, disruption, which I think for sure is like is something we should be worried about. It is interesting in all these like technology cycles, we all tend to think the same things, right? It's like it's very, very easy to imagine the jobs that'll be replaced, and it's very hard to imagine the new jobs, right? Like if you go back 30 years or 40 years in time, you told people in the future, like almost everyone is going to have a job where they're sitting at a desk looking into a screen. Absolutely no one would have believed you, right?
Completely.
But that is what the world looks like today. So it's very easy to imagine what we will potentially replace, and it's very hard to imagine the new jobs. My main worry is not in the long term that there won't be jobs for people. I think they actually absolutely will. I think great companies today are made of great people, and I think that's not going to be any different in the future. I do worry sometimes about the velocity of change that we're seeing.
I want to go back a little bit to what you were talking about, kind of the hype cycles, like, and dig in a little bit more to about how you as a leader keep yourself disciplined amid all this hype. You know, you're talking to people all the time, you're talking to these clients who are, you know, just dying of FOMO and all of that stuff. How do you stay like, you know, clear-headed?
So we've always had this mantra in Synthesia called utility over novelty, which is a way of like thinking about what are we doing? Are we doing things because it's cool and new and fun and interesting, which you can do sometimes, or are we doing this because it actually drives like real value and utility for our customers? And I think standing very hard on that is one of the reasons that we've survived for 9 years and been one of the winners in this category. There's a lot of what I call innovation potholes in these hype cycles. I think we've been good at avoiding them. Most of our competitors who started the company at the same time we did, they're all dead because they tried to chase immature use cases, which may one day work, but the technology just like wasn't there. we went through the VR era where everyone wanted us to build like avatars that worked in 3D and like, some big consultancies building a virtual office and they want to like have avatars in it. Yeah. And it's one of those things where we just try and look at each other and be like, do we really think anyone is actually going to want to put on a VR headset and walk into their virtual office and talk to an avatar in like 2022? And we're all just like, we actually don't believe that. So let's do something where we all can agree we think that's actually valuable if we do it today, right?
Yeah.
But I think like staying optimistic, but critical and measured in these hype cycles is really important, right? And I see a lot of this whole thing about like, should you just churn all of your SaaS tools and build everything yourself? It's like one of my favorite examples of this. I'm not saying that there's not a point in time where maybe you will do that.
Yeah.
But when I speak to someone, they're like, it's amazing, we vibe coded a CRM system, and we don't have to pay for HubSpot or Salesforce. And then you ask them, how many people do you have in your sales team? 15. Okay, so it will cost you maybe $10,000 a year to buy HubSpot or Salesforce, right?
Right.
Now you're spending engineering time on building something which is going to cost you $10,000 a year instead of building a new product for your customers, a new workflow. And 100% the thing you vibe coded, it's going to break. You're going to run into security problems. You're going to run into compliance problems.
Yep.
You're going to need someone to maintain it. And so I think there's just a lot of this like, and again, I'm not saying this should never be the case. I'm just skeptical that everyone should just like vibe code their entire software stack, for example. I think it's a classical innovation pothole of like, it sounds cool, it's very interesting, and everybody wants to do it because it's much more fun than building a boring feature for your customers. But I think you have to be very wary of like jumping too fast into those things.
That's so true. Can you give an example? I feel like for me, the metaverse, I once attended a conference in the metaverse, which was absolutely the worst conference I'd ever attended. I think I only stayed for 5 minutes in like this weird world. That seems like a very obvious one that maybe people might not adopt. But can you tell me about maybe a hard decision that you had to make one time to prioritize utility and really like stick to that?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the use cases for 10 years when we built this company, right, that people are always excited about is like, I would love to send personalized sales videos, where you create a video of an avatar saying like, hey, Victor, I love your work with Synthesia, da, da. And I think it's one of those things where like, maybe one day it will happen and it will be really good. We had a lot of competitors who jumped into that because their VCs were telling them to do it. Right. They had a lot of customer interest of people who wanted to do it.
Yep.
And they built it, and we also built like a tiny piece of this at one point. And it was just like a classical thing for me where like I look at it and like, if I received this video, would I be convinced to buy from this person? I just wouldn't. Like the quality is not good enough.
Yeah.
The avatar looks robotic, it looks odd, it's super expensive to make the videos. I mean, still is, but if you're paying $0.50 or $1 for every one of these videos, and it costs you like 0.5 cents to send an email, the conversion rate has to be so much higher for it to actually be valuable, right?
Right.
There's a lot of things. So it's like it's a classical thing that people dream about it because it sounds really good.
Yep.
But in reality, when you actually think about it from first principles, it's just like not yet a very good idea. Again, it may change. In a year, maybe it'll be different, right? But this is like one of those ideas people for 5 years have been chasing and just hasn't really proven itself to work yet, at least. And so that's one of those decisions where we just had to tell our investors and our customers, look, totally get you're interested in this. I love the idea,
right?
But I just cannot bring myself to build this right now.
Speaking about those changes, like what could happen in the future, what beliefs do you think that we're going to have to abandon in 5 years about what's possible with tech, and what do you think we should hold on to?
I think it's very obvious that a skill like software development, right, is going to be is going to look very different because we're all going to be able to do much more with much less. This skill is going to probably move more away from like building to knowing what to build, and that's a very important detail that I think a lot of people are underestimating. Just because everyone can build stuff doesn't necessarily mean they know how to build the right stuff. Like good product strategy and good product building is also the restraint. Is what are you choosing not to build? How do you simplify stuff? I think we'll see an era of like people are going to build like a lot of crazy stuff, and we're going to have a lot of like very bloated products that aren't very good. But I think that's for sure a skill that's going to be much easier than it was in the past, right? I really believe in humans. I think there's like talk about like there's going to be no jobs left, AI is going to take over the world. I just don't really believe it. I think yes, a lot of things will change. Jobs will probably look very different. Numerical, logical jobs like software development, like moving arbitrary like finance derivatives around in the cloud to make money. Like maybe those jobs will be less valuable, and maybe that will actually be a good thing for the world. And I think jobs that rely on like human connection is going to be more valuable. What we always see in society, right, is that whatever is scarce is more valuable. And historically, people who are really good at like trading finance derivatives, or like really good at like writing code to like build very advanced software products. That's been a scarcity in society, so they've been very well paid.
Yep.
If that gets eroded, then we need to figure out what is now scarce in society, right? And if it's a world in which everything we do is like AI, you're talking to an AI chatbot all the time, you're not ordering your own food at a restaurant, you're using a screen, all this stuff, right, will probably be good. But what that will mean is that it will really stand out when you have like human connection with someone. And so I think a sales team, for example, will be very valuable in the future, despite that being something a lot of people tend to think is going to be automated away, right? I think we shouldn't underestimate how much we as humans like talking to other humans and how valuable that actually is.
Yeah, that's so true. I feel like that's part of the reason people love to listen to these podcasts. It's almost like the radio, you know, people just love to listen to human conversation, human chat, you know, all of that stuff. What about the future of Synthesia? What do you guys need to do to become a $1 billion ARR company?
I mean, a lot of it is really this idea of like inventing a new media format, right? Like figuring out what is the right shape of product and user experience that works. And that's really hard, right? Like these real-time avatars, these real-time videos that we're creating, like one thing is creating the technology. The really hard thing is figuring out like, how is it not just a cool demo, right? How is it not just a novelty, which for sure is cool? How is it actually something that's valuable for people? And that's a hard question. I think we have good answers to it. I think the products we're going to launch the next 6 months, I think kind of like obviously dovetails everything that we've learned. But if we execute on that and we build a new type of interface, a new type of how you interact with your computer, at least for agents that require like a visual interface or visual experience, then I think that's a really, really big market.
And do you think delivering on that is more of an engineering problem or it's more of an adoption problem? How does that kind of break down?
I mean, for sure there's hard engineering problems in solving it, but I think a lot of it is like, is design and product problems, you know? If you take these like real-time videos, it's one of those areas where right now there's like a bunch of different people who are doing it, but no one has figured out like, when is it actually useful?
Right.
You know, for example, there's a lot of customers and people who are doing like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could have like an avatar you could speak to for customer support, right? So instead of like chatting with a customer support, you can put a face to it.
Right.
I think 100% that's going to happen. The idea, I think, is good enough directionally, but the implementation really matters, right? So we see a lot of people who then go and say, okay, let me take my text chatbot and let me give it a face. Then you show it to everyone, everyone's like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, until they have to use it themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're asking, hey, is my refund on the way? You want like a one-line sentence saying, yes, it's on the way, it'll be with you in 5 days.
With zero latency,
You don't
right?
want like 8 seconds of an avatar saying, hey, actually, like, you know, that's not actually a better experience. That's more annoying, right?
Yeah.
So you have to figure out like, where is it valuable? And it's probably not valuable, I think, at least for answering these like very, very simple questions. Probably where it becomes valuable is if it says, you ask it a question around, hey, I can't figure out how to do my refund. It says, hey, let me show you. Let me share my screen and let me show you where to click, or just take you there to do it automatically for you, right? But it's like, the details matter quite a lot in these things. And the most obvious thing of just like putting a face to any like chatbot, a text interface you have today, I think often ends up with these like innovation potholes, right? Where everyone's like, wow, so
it
cool.
Looks so cool, yeah.
Until you have to use it yourself and you're like, this is really effing annoying, right?
Yeah, it's so true. Broadening our imagination a little bit, what do you think AI native video is really going to look like? And what other kinds of media, like we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, do you think it's going to unlock?
I think we're already seeing a bunch of these like new formats. I love this stuff myself. I think it's so interesting. So I love music, and I think, you know, if you go way back in time, a good example of this is like when people started making drum machines and synthesizers. They actually made drum machines because they wanted to replace real drummers, right? Because it's very annoying to travel around with a drum kit. It turned out that the drum sounds was not very good. It was very weird, and no one actually used it to replace a drummer. But people took it and was like, this drum machine can drum in ways a real human drummer cannot, and it sounds in a way that has some like interesting thing to it. And then electronic music was invented, and house music, and techno music, synthesizers, right? Didn't really sound like real instruments, but they ended up sounding like something else, and then we got all this like new music. What we're seeing now with AI video is, I tend to, people always talk about Hollywood. I think Hollywood is going to be the last ones to adopt this stuff. I think what's going to happen is exactly the same thing has happened with the internet and text, which is like bloggers, Twitter people, like people will find new ways of using these things, right? And now you're seeing a lot of like these Instagram channels where you have 10, 20-second clips, people invent some kind of world or like a universe, and it's much more kind of like art, like going to a museum kind of thing. People are being super creative with it. We're seeing a lot of music, which I think is like, you have the meme music now, but people use Suno and those kind of things, right? Where that's a new format of music where like your colleague has a birthday and you send them like a 30-second birthday song for fun, right? Like it's not a song you got to put on Spotify necessarily, but that's like a new format that's interesting, a meme format. You have a lot of this like YouTube channels putting out this like background type of music for like studying whatever, but there's like no artist and it's actually sounds pretty good, but it's a bit weird that it's AI generated. With chatbots, right, you're seeing companies like Character AI, like it can be entertainment to chat with an LLM. Like ChatGPT is very like it's like a matter of fact kind of thing. There's also companies that are having success with like, you would read a book, you can chat to a character, right? So I think we are seeing like the emergence of all these like new media formats, but it always happens very like slowly and kind of invisibly. And as I said, I don't think like AI video is going to be like 90-minute long films that goes to the cinema, Just like blog articles is not a book or a paper magazine, right? It's like different content, like different types of creation.
That's so true. I am writing a novel currently, and I've been playing around with making a trailer for my novel, so that like when I send my novel to people, I can also send them a trailer of almost like what it would look like, so they can get a preview. And that's amazing that I can just do that. So.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's a very important point, right? Most of these technologies create net new use cases. It's exactly the same thing for Synthesia. The reason we've been successful is because we took the world's PowerPoint creators who didn't used to create video, and we enabled them to create video. Like all the video people didn't want to touch our product for many years because they're like, I know how to make a video that looks better than you. Whereas all these people who are making PowerPoints is like, I cannot make a video. You can enable me to make a video, and that's better than the PowerPoint deck I'm currently making. So it's always new technologies generally like expands like the types of users. Software development and code generation is the same thing, right? Like you have all these new people that can now generate stuff. I think that's one of the really cool things about technology. It has like this democratization effect.
Do you have a creative process where you play around with some of this stuff and create stuff?
Yeah, I play around a lot of stuff myself. I set up like small workflows, try to automate like, it could be simple things like reporting on like what's going on in the company to, I do a lot of mock-ups, which is, it's so powerful, right? Like when you're discussing how to build a product, doing it in text or discussing it is 10 times lower fidelity than just saying, hey, I had this idea, here's what it looks like in a mock-up, right? It makes it much better, much faster.
Amazing. Just one final question, because we have a little bit of time left. If you were to give some advice to a young person who's joining tech or is just, looking for a job right now, what would you tell them?
I think there's this perception that there's like no jobs for young people, entry-level jobs are gone. And obviously looking at the data, I think we're seeing, I don't think it's AI-driven, but I think there's never been more opportunity for a young person. Like get involved in AI, like you will be way better at like someone who's been in a job for a very long time at using these tools. It's just picking them up, playing with them, becoming an expert at it. My advice to young people is always like find an area or role or like a type of job that's new, where you're not competing with like 10 million other people who've been doing it forever, right? So when I was 20 years old, I went into what we called growth marketing back then, which was like less focused on like storytelling and narrative and very like data driven. What color should the button be in the product? And that was like a new discipline that didn't really exist. And what that meant for me was that I could be really world class at that in 12, 18 months because there was no one who had been doing it more than like 12, 18 months, right? I think with AI, it's kind of the same thing. There's no one who's been like using AI tools for 10 years. They'll just be way better than you. If you go out, you figure out like how to use these tools, then I think there's like plenty of jobs. I only know companies who are very excited to hire young talent that really knows AI.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Victor. Really appreciated it. And I loved our conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.